Hello there guys, what is going on? SonOfChelsea back here again for another video. It's the new season, so I wanted to do a big preview with a brilliant guest about it. It's very uncertain what's going to happen with Chelsea this campaign. We've still got weeks of the transfer window to go. We've got signings that we think could be announced, players still to leave, and the mood around pre-season hasn't been the greatest. So with a new era, it isn't quite certain what this new Chelsea is going to look like, with so much up in the air, and of course some of our rivals wanting to beat us for Champions League places. But glad to say we are going to look ahead to the new season with a brilliant guest, not only a great Chelsea writer, a great Chelsea reporter, but a great friend of mine as well, Adam Newson, chief correspondent for Chelsea at Football.London. How you doing, mate?
I'm good, thank you, mate. Apologies for my phone going off there, but it probably is a good indication of where we're at in this transfer window, that every sort of few minutes I get a text message about something.
Busy. Like, we've kind of in the midst of all this madness, I think a lot of us have lost our minds. But when we think back to, say, May, just when the season ended and the takeover was going to happen, didn't we always expect this, that it was going to be a bit of a uniquely busy and chaotic summer? Or are we right to feel a little bit concerned?
I think to an extent we expected it. We knew that they were going to have, the new ownership were going to have to act quickly. They hadn't had time to really formulate plans in terms of a transfer strategy. And look, for the first 2 or 3 weeks of the ownership, it was all very quiet, as Todd Boehly and the Clear Lake guys really settled into the club, got to know different aspects of the club. And then it was sort of the middle of June where everything started really kicking off. But I guess, what's probably the most concerning, I guess, is you can't really see any semblance of a plan in terms of Chelsea's transfer approach. Yes, they needed defenders and they are working on getting defenders. But after signing Raheem Sterling, they've also now, different names have popped up for the attack. Different players have popped up for midfield, which is an area that Chelsea is actually quite stacked in already. And probably the biggest surprise is how few players have left at this point, for me, just because we're probably 4 weeks or so to the end of the window, and we were going through it yesterday, and there's a good sort of 17, 18 players who you can't say for certain, right, I know where their futures lie in 4 weeks' time, maybe a little bit longer. So I think that's probably my biggest surprise. Yes, we knew it was going to be chaotic, but I guess we perhaps didn't quite appreciate how chaotic it would be, and how chaotic it would be late into the window, because I do think this is going to drag on until really deadline day.
I do have a theory, and maybe it's a hope, maybe it's just confidence based on what's happened already and some of the signings that could still be announced, that we end up in a place on September the 2nd where we look at the incomings and maybe outgoings as well, and actually end up in a pretty happy and content place, that the targets do make sense, but the process of getting there was so chaotic. I want to drill down on Tuchel, because everything that was briefed when the takeover happened, that Tuchel was basically going to take an influential approach on the way Chelsea's transfer business is done. I mean, this is probably the most influence a coach at Chelsea has got over transfers for about 20 years, right? Or maybe a little bit less. I mean, at least in recent years. So you have to assume that all of this is with Tuchel's blessing. My theory, and it's a wild one, is that he himself, based on some of the quotes we've heard of him being a little bit frustrated of how much he's having to do, is just kind of being given names and is just going, I know that's a really maybe lazy take, but I do wonder, given the amount of work he has now on the training ground to get this team ready for the Premier League season, that's why maybe the targets feel so sort of slapdash and going from one. Cucurella came out of absolute nowhere. Like, we hadn't heard his name for months.
I mean, there is an element of that, and Tuchel has admitted that yes, he has suggested players to Todd Boehly, but Todd Boehly has also come to him with players that he's either been offered or maybe has been sort of informed by Chelsea's own recruitment team, who, let's not forget, are still in place. So there is an element, I'm sure, of Tuchel having a conversation with Todd Boehly, and Todd Boehly saying, look, there's a possibility of this deal being done. What are your thoughts? And at that point, obviously, Tuchel has the power of veto, essentially. I mean, you look at the Cristiano Ronaldo situation earlier this summer, at least. Todd Boehly, from what I understand, was I guess unsurprisingly, fairly keen on getting Ronaldo. You look at him as a marketing purpose, just alone, without the footballing side of it, he would have been massive for the Chelsea brand, which is a word I know supporters maybe don't like, but it's a reality. So Tuchel was able to push back on that. So he does have a lot of power, as you say. Not every Chelsea head coach in recent years has been able to do that. They've very much had to maybe work to what Roman Abramovich or Marina Granovskaya has given them. So it's a tricky one to really know which target is a Tuchel target, which target is a Chelsea target, which target was maybe offered to Boehly, and it's a deal that could be done. There's probably an element of each of these across the spectrum of Chelsea's transfer window at this point. But you kind of look at the names. Sterling was probably someone Tuchel really wanted. Was someone Tuchel really wanted. And Koulibaly was obviously someone the club have long pursued, and is an experienced defender, and that was maybe more of a collective decision. Where Chelsea go the rest of this window, I mean, it's anyone's guess. I really truly think that now, because you do have so many players almost on a daily basis, players getting linked with a move to Chelsea. There's more substance to certain rumours than others. And then we'll see where it all lies. But yeah, I mean, Tuchel does have a power of veto, essentially.
Before we get into, because I want to ask about Tuchel, because I think there's a lot to discuss about his mood and how that's going to define Chelsea's season. Just two targets, basically. One that we suspect is going to happen, and one that, could still happen and could be quite big. Cucurella, who I just mentioned, over coming out of nowhere. I mean, there was a bit of a mess and uncertainty on Wednesday evening, because I uploaded a video. Typical, the moment I published it, there was a here we go. There was all the stuff that is effectively done, green light, and then a few hours later we had Brighton officially releasing a statement saying that nothing had been agreed. I guess just a little bit on that. And then Cucurella, how do you think he fits into Thomas Tuchel's plans? Because, I mean, a new wing back that's not a shock piece of business. And I think when you actually cut away the noise, I think it's a deal that makes a lot of sense, given where Chelsea fell short once Chilwell got injured last season.
Yeah, from that perspective, definitely. We saw that Marcos Alonso couldn't quite replicate what Ben Chilwell could do in that wing-back position. And as you say, it did really harm Chelsea. I guess, and it's kind of circling back to a point I made a minute ago, I'm surprised that Chelsea are doing this without having at least moved on one of their wing-backs, because obviously Emerson's still in the building, Marcos Alonso is still in the building, despite interest from Barcelona. So you're bringing in a fourth left wing back as things stand at the moment. So it is kind of it kind of informs you that Marcos Alonso will almost certainly go, and maybe Emerson too. In terms of Cucurella, it's a smart signing. It's a lot of money for a wing back who maybe not be your first choice once Ben Chilwell is fully up to speed. Because I think we all accept that. Look, Chilwell missed 6 months of football. Yes, he's done pre-season, maybe hasn't looked fully back up to speed yet. That's understandable. And maybe this is a good sort of stopgap to really help Ben Chilwell get back to his best in a time that isn't rushed. But I'm intrigued by this suggestion that Cucurella will play as a left centre-back. I know he did it for Brighton, but the noises we heard around Jules Koundé was that Tuchel was never truly convinced, because he had question marks about whether Koundé's height would be an issue in the Premier League. Now, Cucurella is smaller than Jules Koundé. So if Tuchel had an issue with Koundé's height at right centre-back, what's the thinking maybe with Cucurella at left centre-back? But, if you're looking at Cucurella mainly as a wing-back or as a left-back, if Tuchel wants to switch, I think it's a good signing. It is a lot of money, but you kind of look at the going rate now in the Premier League for a full-back stroke wing-back, and it kind of does feel that £50 million mark is the barometer now. You look at what Man City spent on Kyle Walker down the years, and yeah, it's a good signing. I think maybe a little bit on the expensive side for me, but one that I'm sure Chelsea will benefit from in the sort of weeks ahead.
The other one I think is Wesley Fofana. So, he's done his best to try and spark up interest over this move, intentionally or unintentionally, we're not quite sure, over cryptic tweets and removing Leicester from his bio. I think Fabrizio Romano, maybe it was Ben Jacobs as well, reporting today that Chelsea have bid around 60 million and it's been rejected. there's a thought that Chelsea have to go up to about 80 to get anything done. I guess just on Wesley Fofana's side, I find it quite intriguing because, he's quite clearly got a settled place there at Leicester, a massive player there, but it's maybe this interest has been there for a while, and there's something clearly can happen right there. I don't think all of this noise comes out of nowhere just because Chelsea can't do a deal. Quite clearly, Chelsea feel there's something there, but it will take a massive fee, obviously.
Yeah, I think Chelsea's interest in Fofana, again, much like we were discussing, it's quite long standing. It's not a new thing. So that maybe Chelsea have gone down the list and now decided, okay, we know it's going to cost us a lot of money, but let's try and get him. I mean, a lot of people were very quick to highlight the Ben Chilwell similarities to Brendan Rodgers coming out and saying, Ben Chilwell's not for sale. He's repeated that with Fofana. Obviously, Ben Chilwell ended up moving to Chelsea. So, yes, Leicester don't want to sell Fofana, but I think they will for the right price. It's whether or not Chelsea gets that right price, as you say. It's mentioned to be around 80 million, may even be a touch more than that with add-ons. And that's an awful lot of money for a centre-back. I mean, it probably would make Fofana the world's most expensive centre-back, which the last one wasn't exactly, or hasn't been a resounding success at Manchester United. But Fofana's young enough that I think if you can get, yes, it's a lot of money, but if you can get him signed at, I think he's 23, that's a possibility of having a centre-back position locked down for many years to come, because he is Premier League proven. He's still young enough that you could get 6-7 years out of him. Maybe that is worth an £80 million outlay, more than other sort of players in that position. So I think from his perspective, he wants to come. And I've been told he's been putting, everyone's seen the social media stuff, but also internally, he's been asking Leicester to accept what they would say is a fair bid, which, we know the asking price. I guess from Chelsea's perspective, I'd be looking at what's going on with James Maddison and Newcastle, because my suspicion is Leicester won't want to sell both this summer. Newcastle haven't got close to what Leicester want for Maddison yet, and obviously Chelsea haven't got close to what Leicester want for Fofana yet. But that can change very quickly, and if I'm Chelsea, maybe I want to get that sorted faster, because you don't want to be throwing down that big bid that you finally come to the conclusion it's worth it, only to discover that Newcastle are down the line with Maddison. So, yeah, I think it will depend on how desperate I think Chelsea do get with this, how quickly they want to get in this centre-back, because we know it's been a position they've wanted to strengthen all summer and have run into roadblocks with Matthijs de Ligt and then Koundé. So I think it's all down to Chelsea, how desperate they are and how quick they really want to get this done. Focusing
in on Chelsea and Thomas Tuchel, I hinted earlier about his sort of mood, because it hasn't been the best, and there have been shades of Jose and Conte, a lot more than, say, his first 12 months at Chelsea, where none of that was kind of present in his press conferences. I think a lot of people enjoy that. I was out in Orlando. It was the only preseason game I saw live, and it was probably the best one I could have picked, because we got absolutely thumped by Arsenal, and there were major concerns after that game. And obviously you covered a lot of it up close, not only the games, but you were out in the US, I believe, for the first 3 games, and obviously interviewed a lot of players. How much does Tuchel's mood and his approach to this season define Chelsea? Well, it's obviously going to be huge, especially given, as we've been talking about, the power Tuchel has been given by Todd Boehly and the new ownership. It is very much on him to deliver. His mood in America was interesting, because we had the opportunity to speak to him in LA during the training camp, and that was quite early on into the trip, actually. And even at that point, he seemed a little bit jaded, looked a little bit tired, admitted to us that, yes, he would rather not be involved in the transfer business side of it, but he had to, because, he was almost obligated to with the new ownership and Marina Granovskaya and Petr Cech moving on. And then you saw during the tour in Las Vegas, he was pretty relaxed still. But then I think the squad went to Orlando. I don't think training was ideal at that point, because as you know from being there, it's extremely hot, extremely humid, not the best sort of climate that you would want
when you're trying to work these guys really hard and you are trying to put, to use Tuchel's own words, kilometres into the legs. You do have to push these guys hard in pre-season, but in that kind of environment, it does become very hard and very draining. And I think you saw that reflected in the performance against Charlotte and against Arsenal. These guys were very, very weary, and especially by the end of the tour, the sort of the noises were that a lot of players were ready to come back to more familiar surroundings at Cobham at that point. Obviously, the Arsenal result happened, and Tuchel's never particularly pleasant, shall we say, when Chelsea lose. And I don't think that's a bad thing. He is a bad loser, and that's probably what you want from your top tier head coach. But his press conference after Arsenal was very surprising at just how open he was and how strong he went at a few things. Obviously, saying a lot of players want to go. And I know that's an argument you've made of, okay, but you still pick these players, and it's a completely fair argument. Essentially saying, yes, the issues with the attack are still there because we have the same attack. Again, yes, that is true, but he's also there to coach and to try and do better. And that is a message he's always said throughout his tenure, really, is that if we're not scoring enough goals, then it's on me as a coach and us as a coaching team to find a way to create more chances so that we do score more goals. So that was an interesting choice. And just his general demeanour, obviously, after the Arsenal game was very low. And I did feel it spooked a lot of supporters and sort of raised eyebrows amongst the press of, okay, something maybe is a little bit off here at Tuchel. Now, coming back to the UK, having the Udinese games, I think has probably helped. It's just lifted the mood a little bit more. Having sort of 2 wins in 2 days with much changed sides. And then I'm genuinely, we're recording this, on the Thursday. We've got the first press conference tomorrow morning. And I'm genuinely quite intrigued to see what kind of mood Tuchel comes into that in. He is usually quite quite pleasant, introduce, hello everybody, quite relaxed, quite jovial. So it will be intriguing to see, just to see what he enters this press conference mood wise in and how he handles it. And by having that Arsenal press conference, he has almost created a situation where questions are going to be asked now. I can't predict what's going to be asked in the press conference, but I wouldn't be surprised if you're getting questions about Timo Werner's future, if you're getting questions about other players in the squad who want to go, if you're getting questions about the attack, if you're getting, there's going to be quite a lot that Tuchel himself has raised that he's now going to be asked about again, probably again through the rest of the window. So, yeah, it's going to be an intriguing press conference, and I do think we will maybe get a little bit more of a read as to exactly how Tuchel's feeling after a couple of weeks back in the UK and away from that sort of bubble of America.
You go back to, say, Conte's second season, and there was a feeling of dread before the Burnley game, and you go to Frank's second season, where I distinctly remember that press conference before the Brighton game, which we actually won, but you felt in the first few weeks he was kind of dealing with a new level of pressure. And although there is the uncertainty, although there is the new ownership, and you can throw a lot of caveats over what Tuchel's had to deal with, I think he's dealt with a lot of difficult situations at Chelsea so far very well. With that added, power, Spider-Man quote, comes responsibility. It comes a lot of responsibility and I just wonder how he's going to deal with it if the season doesn't start well. But I think a lot of us need football. We need to start seeing games, and hopefully that will help endear Tuchel again to supporters, because they haven't seen him face to face for a few months. I do want to ask about Raheem Sterling, because in one way it's so exciting to have such an accomplished player at Chelsea, and a player I've rated for a very long time. But how much do you think, I don't want to just sound really negative, but how much do you think Tuchel getting the best out of Raheem defines the season and also kind of makes us judge his ability to get the best out of an attack? Because this is another guy, a bit like Lukaku last year, who has spent his career just being a productive attacker. You look at him, he's only been at 2 major clubs really in his senior football career, Liverpool and Man City, but the way he's outscored Chelsea's attackers over the last 5 years from a wide position is quite incredible. And there are some good early signs. The Udinese game I thought was quite encouraging, his movement and where Tuchel placed him. But yeah, just on Sterling, because I think he I feel the balance, unless Sterling goes out and does a ludicrous interview, I think the balance here is going to be on Tuchel getting the best out of Sterling.
Yeah, as you say, Sterling has proved himself time and time again through his career, and he's coming into Chelsea at 27. And I think there's going to be a responsibility put upon Sterling to lead this attack now. He's not going to be a side piece, maybe as he was at City. He is going to be the sort of main guy. I mean, unless something very dramatic happens in the last weeks of the transfer window. But I think Sterling is going to be this sort of marquee figure and the leader of the attack. And as you say, there's a responsibility then on Tuchel to make sure that Sterling is in an environment and in a system that really brings the best out of him to do that. I did think against Udinese we saw some really promising signs. The Mount Havertz, Sterling, three, there was a lot of interchange of positions, a lot of movement. Probably what we saw a little bit more at Chelsea in Tuchel's first sort of 6 months in charge when it was Mount Havertz and Werner. This ability, the constant rotation, the movement, the ability to run in behind. I mean, it was all very effective against Udinese, and it did probably just give you a glimpse into how Chelsea will set up against Everton, I think, on Saturday. And if Sterling is given this role as, well, he played as sort of the 9 against Udinese, but it was very sort of a very free role where he did go into a lot of different positions. I think it's an intriguing one for him, and I think it's one that can get a lot out of him because his ability to attack space in the box, especially, is something that not a lot of Chelsea forwards have. I don't think it's Havertz's forte. It's probably not Mount's, not Ziyech's. I mean, Christian Pulisic is probably the second best at doing that, attacking the box properly, getting into that 6-yard box. But I think you bring in Sterling, yes, he's gonna have a big influence in the attack, but you also have to make sure that those around him are creating chances, because if they do, he will score. And I think there'll be a lot of responsibility on the wing backs as well in this system that Chelsea seem to be sticking with to really help Sterling and create those opportunities, those overloads. So as long as Sterling can start well, I'm quite confident that he'll have a very strong season, because, as you say, he's been around long enough. He's proved himself, and it'll be on Tuchel to make sure that the system continues to let Sterling score the goals that he has done at Man City.
I've listened to a lot of Premier League previews, and I know it's obviously not Chelsea centric, but I've been quite baffled at the lack of talk over Todd Boehly and the fact that Chelsea literally did change ownership over the summer. What do you think the new owners' sort of expectations are for this season? Now, obviously, they've got a lot on their plate, and there's going to be a lot of off-pitch stuff that I'm sure still needs to happen in terms of structure, in terms of recruitment, in terms of fan involvement in a shadow board, all that stuff that hasn't materialised yet, and the stadium as well. But on the pitch, because I think a lot of us just are kind of going into this season and saying it's maintaining Champions League football and that's kind of it, and hopefully we're competitive in cups. With their signings, with their investment, do you think there is something more there with Tuchel, in the sense that they are maybe looking a little bit higher than we are as supporters, and there's kind of a difference in expectation? Yeah,
so I think from Todd Boehly's perspective in Clear Lakes, I think this season is going to be about top 4 first and foremost, as it should always be at Chelsea. I think there's still an acceptance that Liverpool and Man City are ahead. And obviously you look at the business that maybe Tottenham have done with and having Antonio Conte. Arsenal have strengthened. I mean, it's not going to be easy to fit. Well, it is impossible to fit 6 teams into top 4. So there is going to be 2 that miss out. And I think if you're Todd Boehly, of course you'd like a strong season as your first season as owner. You want Chelsea to be competitive in Europe. You want them to compete in the Cup. But I think if you're looking solely at the Premier League, it has to be top 4. It has to be top 4. And I think that's maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's probably in line with what fans are thinking at this point. Yes, you don't want to be in that situation of Arsenal a few years back, where you see top 4 as an achievement. But I think you look at the strength of the top 6 now. It has to be the minimum for Chelsea, and it has to be the first goal of every season, is to secure that top 4 finish and get Champions League football, because of how important that is for the club's revenue. So from my perspective, yeah, and I think Boehly's perspective, top 4, maybe a good run in the Cups again, competitive in Europe, hopefully get to the latter stages of the Champions League, which, I mean, look, Tuchel is what he is, but he's proven that in cup competitions he can really get Chelsea going, and that he can devise game plans that really keep Chelsea strong in cup competitions. I mean, yes, they went out to Real Madrid last season in the quarterfinals, but you look at that sort of poor 45 minutes in the first leg, and then the Edu Mendy mistake, and that killed Chelsea, because the way they went to the Bernabeu and played was so impressive. And even though they didn't go through that, you saw the positives from it. So I think there's going to be points in this season where it's hard. I think that's, inevitable, given the fact it's a very strange season with the World Cup in the middle. So it's so sort of squeezed together this first half of the season that there'll be little, and it won't even be long. It'll be maybe 10 days, 2 weeks, where you maybe drop a level and you can suddenly drop sort of 7-8 points just because of how squeezed it all is. But I do think Chelsea have to finish in top 4, because that'll be what Boehly and Clearlake are focused on, is getting top 4, that Champions League money again next season, and then building from there again.
I know you're very busy, and obviously with the way we said at the start of this discussion,
it's all about four new players. Chelsea.
Yeah, I mean, transfers, God knows what's going to happen. Barcelona hijack, we're hijacking, other teams are hijacked. There's just been so many hijacks this window for a lifetime. But I feel like sort of finally, rather than going into sort of predictions, it's kind of a prediction, but just maybe a little bit more uplifting. Is one thing that you're really excited to see at Chelsea this season? One thing that you feel like can bring maybe fans a lot of joy, is going to be entertaining to report about, maybe cover for Football.London, just something that, as I say, hopefully can be quite a positive of this season.
I mean, I'm not sure if it's strictly fitting into that criteria, but I really do hope that Chelsea rediscover their form at Stamford Bridge. And make it a place where, when you're going to a game at Stamford Bridge, all the home supporters are going there feeling confident, feeling like they're going to see not only a Chelsea win maybe, but a good performance, a dominant performance, that you've got this feeling that the opposition are already sort of half know their beat because they're going to Stamford Bridge. We've had it in the past, obviously, with Jose Mourinho, and that first great Chelsea team of the Roman Abramovich era, where they just didn't lose at home. And I'm not expecting that now, because I do think the Premier League is far more competitive across the board. But I'd love to get that feeling of going to Stamford Bridge, knowing, as much as you can do, that you're going to see a very good Chelsea performance. And you're almost certainly going to see a Chelsea win, because I think that just helps everybody's mood. I mean, you were fortunate, or unfortunate enough, I guess, depending on how you view it, to still be able to go to the last games of last season when it was a reduced crowd. And the feeling inside the stadium was so, not demoralised, but almost just weary, and almost there was this feeling of wanting the season to end, and people were going to games almost out of obligation rather than actually of wanting to go to games. It's like, yeah, I've got a ticket. I'm fortunate enough to be one of the 25,000 with a season ticket, so I really should go. And I think that is never the feeling you want as a supporter. You want to be going to the home games, especially with a sense of excitement, of intrigue, of feeling like you're going to be entertained. And I think that, for me, is what I would really like, from a reporting perspective, from a fan perspective, just to be on the train to Fulham Broadway, thinking, great, we've got a game today. We're really going to be in for something special, because I just think last season, especially the last few months, became so difficult, and fans should always want to go and watch their team. They shouldn't ever feel like it's a chore.
Yeah, absolutely. I think last season was the least amount of home wins since the 15-16 season. So, I mean, I don't think it was the lowest points, but the last 2 seasons at home haven't been that great. And obviously, I think that would be essential for Chelsea compared to their rivals. And I think for Tuchel as well, growing that sort of dominant feeling of, like if you want to reach sort of Liverpool, Man City levels, you look at how dominant they are at home. They do lose a couple, but particularly Liverpool, how dominant they've been at Anfield. So hopefully, like under Jose and all of our best teams, there's a lot of enjoyment and success to be had at Stamford Bridge. Thank you once again, Adam, for joining me. I know you're going to be at Goodison Park on Saturday evening for the opening game of the Premier League season, that glorious trip up to Merseyside where Chelsea always do so well at Everton. Like, it's just one of our favourite grounds. So hopefully we do get the win. Before we go, like I do with all my guests, just a chance to shout out where people can find your work online, and obviously a lot of coverage coming up from yourself, and maybe a personal goal in terms of the games that you want to speak about, of getting to a load of them this season.
Yeah, I mean, similar to where your work is housed, mine's housed on Football.London. You can find me on social media, at Adam Newson, pretty much across social media will get you to me. Personal, yeah, I mean, I'd love to try and do every game this season. That's kind of a goal I'm setting out, whether life and probably my wife will actually let me get away every single weekend, especially with a young daughter. I'm not sure, but that would be something I'd love to do. I'd love to be able to get to every single game this season, and maybe with the World Cup, actually, it kind of helps because usually in December is when there's extra pressure to get some time off. But there'll be no games in the beginning of December, so yeah, hopefully.
Well, and as well, it could be pretty mental in terms of travel because of the back-to-back way Champions League games I think are happening, and
yeah.
I'm pretty sure within there's going to be some mental travelling where Chelsea, depending on who we get in the group stage, but probably some nice travelling as well. I know at the back end of last season you were going to like the Bernabeu, Old Trafford. I mean, a lot of nice trips. So the stress of being a football reporter, that's what we're talking about right here. And of course the catering at Stamford Bridge. You didn't mention that of one of the joys of the next season.
True. That is true. You do have to be wary with the catering at Stamford Bridge, though, that you don't go too excessive because it is very easy to. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, the Champions League back-to-back games, we'll see how many I can do in all sort of real world, because with the press conferences, a Cobham with travelling, we'll see. I mean, I'm trying to. I'll try to, but we'll see if that becomes a reality.
Well, let's hope there is a lot of games to go to and Chelsea do make it far in a lot of these competitions. But thank you, Adam. Thank you guys for watching today's video. The season is nearly here and hopefully Chelsea can mark it with a win at Goodison Park for the first time in about 5 years, and hopefully under Todd Boehly we're in for an exciting season, an exciting end to the transfer window. So thank you guys for watching. Subscribe, follow me on Twitter at SonOfChelsea, and I'll see you again very soon. All the best.